Coins of Colombia. Well, before we dive into the coins of Colombia proper, I have one small bit of housekeeping from the previous file, namely about China. I neglected to show the reverse of the 5 yuan coin. There it is. Nice specimen there. Okay, so now diving properly into the coins of Colombia, it's interesting to see that this country, unlike the others that we've dealt with so far, the first coins made for Colombia in the United States were not products of the U.S. Mint, but of another mint. And in the Alts and Barton, it actually includes a small appendix where it talks about some of these other mints in America. The Waterbury Mint is the one that made these coins for Colombia. So, anyway, but it had kind of a place that related to it, because it says here, the firm supplied the planchets for the Venezuelan 1 centavo and 2.5 centavos coins, which were struck at Philadelphia in 1876 and 1877. We'll be seeing those when we get to the sections on Venezuela. From 1888 to 1906, many of the U.S. 1 cent and 5 cent pieces, the planchets for those, also came from the Waterbury Mint. So, that said, here's what I have of the Waterbury Mint from 1881. This is a 2.5 cent. Okay. From 1886, here's a 5 cent. These are just copper nickel coins. You see, this one has a very big 5 in centavos. Also in 1886, they have another variety, slightly different front, and a slightly smaller 5 with some more additional ribbon work under the 5 centavos. There's also an 1888. So made, and obviously the same. And both these denominations were again made in 1902. The 2.5 cent and a 5 cent of whichever design. Problem was, the ones made in 1902 were intended for Panama, or the area that would become Panama. And almost immediately we turned right around and helped sponsor the Panama Revolution that created the nation of Panama. And suddenly we were wanting to make our different coinage for Colombia and another coinage for the new country of Panama. So besides the 5 cent from 1902, the 2.5 cent, which are made of nickel and now very rare because they basically recalled them almost immediately, there's now the U.S. Mint's 5 cent piece, which in this case was made out of silver. República de Colombia, 1902. And there it is, 5 cents. But it's smaller because it's made out of silver. The other thing we made for them at the time was this 50 cent piece. And again, instead of a personage, you see it's 1902. You see it's 1.25 grams. This is only 835 silver. Interesting. Anyway, instead of that, okay, they would in future years begin doing, as other countries, including the United States, started to do, featuring actual historic persons on coins. So when they made some more 50 cent pieces in 1916, they put someone on there. Now in this case, you notice it's the same weight, but now it's a 900 fine silver, exactly the same as a standard U.S. half dollar. Now, when it came to these, we weren't the only mint making these coins. As it turns out, there were other countries also making these coins for Colombia, but it is easy to tell theirs from ours. If you look at the date, you can see that the date on that one, most likely made in Bogota, you see protrudes out. The 6 isn't even under his neck at all. Whereas with ours, the entire 1916, or whatever the date may be, is entirely underneath his somewhat thicker neck. Also, Barton also talks a little bit about that, showing, this is what the U.S. made one looks like, and this is what the non-U.S. made one looks like. I don't know about you, but this guy looks a lot like Franklin Roosevelt. This guy looks a lot like Caligula, but I think that's just an artifact of the lighting when they took this picture. So, anyway, getting back to the Colombian coins that were made in the U.S. Mint. The Mint had made a few more of these in 1917, and they dated them 1917. These are somewhat rare, so they don't get seen as much. And I haven't found one yet, but I know they exist. In 1920, they began making 1 cent and 2 pieces. I don't have anything for 1920. However, 1921, I have what there was, which is this 1 cent. 1 centavo. República de Colombia. Here is a 2 cent. Colombia 1921. And I see it says 2 centavos. Not that great a shape. They didn't make a 5 cent, but they've been, for 1921, made more of the 50 cent. And there it is. Okay. In 1922, they continued making some 50 cent pieces. Somewhat lower specimen, but at least it photographs well. Then they made some more all the way up in 1933. They made the 1 cent again. It's actually a pretty nice specimen. They made the 2 cent. Okay. They also made a 5 cent, which unfortunately for 1933 I don't have. But 1934 they made the 50 cent yet one more time. This is now actually a pretty nice specimen. And this one, despite some toning, still has very real mint luster. Same standards metallically speaking. And then in 1935, they made some coins again. These are 1 cent for 1935. There's a 2 cent, which I haven't found yet. And there's a 5 cent for 1935. So at last I have a 5 centavos. Then in 1938, they did the same thing, and I got the same thing. There's a 1 cent. Now it lasts very nicely preserved. Okay, there's a 2 cent, which again I don't have. There's a 5 cent. There's that. And then after World War II, one more loan request. Both Philadelphia and San Francisco this time made a bunch of 1946 5 cent pieces, 5 centavos. There are some of these from other countries, but the date will be larger than that, or look like it's a date over another date. Those are not made in America. So that's what there was for Colombia.